The wind howled across the desolate plains of Montana as snow fell in relentless sheets, blanketing the land in silence. Inside a small log cabin, the faint crackle of a dying fire fought against the cold that crept through every crack and crevice. Cole Tanner, a rugged cowboy in his mid-30s, sat hunched near the hearth, his hat shadowing eyes red with grief and exhaustion. In his trembling arms rested two tiny bundles, his newborn twins, no more than a week old. Their cries pierced through the night, echoing the ache in his heart. Just 10 days ago, his wife, Mary, had breathed her last during childbirth. She had smiled weakly, whispering his name, then faded into eternal sleep before she could even hold her babies. Now Cole was left alone in this wilderness, clutching life in his arms while death still lingered in the corners of the cabin. He had tried everything to feed them, mixing warm water with bits of oats, using old remedies the ranch women had told him years ago. But nothing worked. The babies' cries grew weaker, their lips dry and their bodies frail. The nearest town was 20 miles away through snowdrifts higher than a man's knees. His horse was half-starved, and the path was nearly invisible under the storm's fury. Yet, as the cries grew softer, Cole's desperation turned to madness. He wrapped the twins in thick wool, tucked them close to his chest, and saddled his horse just before dawn. The blizzard cut through him like knives, but he didn't care. "Hold on, my little ones," he whispered through chattering teeth. "Papa's gonna find you milk, even if it's the last thing I do." Hours turned into an eternity. The snow blinded his vision, freezing his breath in midair. His horse stumbled more than once, but Cole kept pushing forward. When he finally reached the general store in town, it was shuttered tight, closed for the winter storm. He pounded on doors, calling out for help, but the only answers were the howls of the wind. Defeated and half-frozen, he turned back toward home, praying for a miracle. Each mile back felt longer than the last. The babies had stopped crying by then. He feared the worst until one of them moved, letting out a faint whimper that reignited his strength. He rode faster, tears freezing to his beard. When Cole finally reached his cabin, dusk had fallen. The lantern outside flickered weakly in the wind, and the snow had piled high against the door. He pushed it open, stumbling inside, collapsing near the fire with the twins in his arms. He whispered a trembling prayer. "Lord, I don't ask for much, but please don't take them too. Send me away. Send me someone." And as if heaven had been listening, a soft knock echoed through the storm. Cole froze. No one traveled these roads, not in weather like this. He stood weak and wary, opening the door just enough to see a figure cloaked in snow. A woman stood there, her dark hair damp, her cheeks red from the cold, her eyes filled with both fear and purpose. "I'm sorry to come uninvited," she said, her voice shaking, "but I saw the light from your cabin. My horse collapsed a mile back and I had nowhere else to go." Cole blinked, uncertain if she was real. You're welcome to stay," he said, stepping aside. As she entered, her gaze fell upon the twins lying in the crib made of Mary's old rocking chair. "They're newborns," she whispered. "Are they yours?" He nodded slowly, words catching in his throat. "Their mother's gone." The woman's expression softened. She took a hesitant step forward. "Do you have milk?" she asked gently. Cole shook his head. "Been looking for days. I can't lose them too." Her eyes shimmered as she removed her snow-soaked cloak. "Then let me help," she said quietly. "My name is Clara, and I can nurse them." For a moment, the room was silent except for the crackling fire and the soft whimper of a baby. Cole felt his heart break open with both gratitude and disbelief. That night, under the storm's furious watch, life began to return to the cabin. Clara warmed the twins near the fire, humming softly as she fed them. Cole watched, his eyes glistening, his soul torn between grief and wonder. Maybe, just maybe, Mary's prayer had been answered through this stranger who had appeared at his door. As dawn broke, the storm eased and sunlight spilled gently across the snow. Inside that cabin, hope flickered once again. If this chapter touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for Chapter 2. The story is just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the cabin that once echoed with sorrow began to breathe with warmth again. Clara stayed, at first out of necessity. Her horse was gone, the roads impassable, but soon it was something deeper that kept her there. Each morning she would rise early, tending the fire, feeding the twins, and humming lullabies that made even the harshest winter morning feel tender. Cole, still haunted by Mary's memory, found himself drawn to her quiet strength. She was different from the women he'd known, No fancy words, no fear of hard work. Her hands were scarred, her eyes kind but filled with stories she didn't speak. Cole learned that Clara had been widowed too. Her husband, a soldier, had died the year before. With no family left, she'd been traveling west in search of a fresh start when the storm stranded her. "Seems we both lost everything," she once said, gazing into the fire. Cole had nodded silently. "Maybe not everything," he murmured. The twins grew stronger under her care. Cole often watched her cradle them, whispering to them softly, smiling in ways that made his chest ache with emotions he thought he'd buried forever. Sometimes late at night he would step outside under the stars, feeling Mary's presence in the wind. "You sent her, didn't you?" he whispered. "You knew I couldn't do this alone." Winter began to fade and the land started to thaw. Clara spoke of leaving once spring came, her voice uncertain. "You've been kind, Cole, but I don't want to overstay my welcome." He tried to answer, but his throat tightened. The idea of that cabin without her laughter, without her warmth, felt unbearable. Yet he said nothing, afraid that speaking his heart might break the fragile peace they'd built. One evening, as the sun set over the snowy hills, Clara was rocking the twins when one of them reached out and touched her face. Cooing, tears welled in her eyes. Cole saw it too. "They love you," he said quietly. She smiled through her tears. "And I love them." Silence hung between them, heavy and sweet. "Clara," he began, his voice trembling, "I ain't much of a man left. Lost my wife, my will, and near lost my faith. But since you walked through that door, this house feels alive again." Clara turned toward him, her expression tender yet pained. "I didn't plan to stay, Cole," she whispered. "But sometimes, God doesn't ask for plans. He just asks for hearts willing to heal." That night, as the twins slept, Cole sat beside her at the fire. He took her hand, rough, warm, trembling, and said, "You gave life back to my babies and to me. I don't have riches, Clara, but I have a home. Stay, not as a guest, but as family." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I'll stay," she said softly. "Not because I'm lost anymore, but because I've finally found where I belong." Spring arrived, painting the valley in green. The twins laughed in the sunlight. Clara's voice carried across the fields, and Cole worked the land again, stronger than before. The cabin, once a place of loss, became a home of new beginnings. Sometimes, as the evening sky blushed with gold, Cole would lift his sons into his arms, watching Clara from the porch, and whisper, "You see this, Mary? They're safe." She came when we needed her most. And in that quiet peace, love bloomed again, not to replace what was lost, but to remind that even after the coldest winter, spring always comes. If you felt this story warm your heart, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more emotional Western tales of love, loss, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories alive.